April 1980, Ambato, Ecuador. The river breaks its banks. Water rises fast, mud, rocks, debris. The flash flood sweeps everything in its path. Morning comes. Water recedes. Local residents step out to assess the damage, and they freeze. 4 small bodies lie on the riverbank, young victims, between 9 and 12 years old, all showing signs of strangulation, all buried here in shallow graves near the water. Police begin their investigation. They think this is human trafficking. They don't know the truth. 3 weeks later, a man in a holding cell confesses to over 300 murders spanning a decade. He calls himself the man of the century. Psychiatrists will say he's a sociopath incapable of remorse. Investigators will follow him to 53 graves in the mountains. Judges will give him 16 years for over 100 confirmed victims. Authorities will release him twice, and in 1999, he will vanish forever. His name is Pedro Alonso López, the monster of the Andes, and to this day, nobody knows if he's alive or dead. October 8, 1948, Santa Isabel, Colombia. A woman screams in childbirth. Her name is Benilda López de Castañeda. She works in the oldest profession. This is her 7th child out of 13. The boy's father is Medardo Reyes, married to another woman, keeps Benilda as a secret. 6 months before the birth, rebels shoot him dead in a grocery store. Wrong place, wrong time. Colombia is burning. La Violencia, a civil war that will claim over 200,000 lives. Violence is everywhere. Massacres, executions, terror as daily life. They name the boy Pedro Alonso López. He grows up in difficult circumstances. His mother receives clients in the back rooms. 5, 6 men per day. Pedro and his siblings learn to stay quiet when the men come. He witnesses transactions constantly, hears them through thin walls, sees his mother with strangers. Money changes hands, bodies move, no privacy, no boundaries. Psychologists will later say this distorted his understanding of intimacy and love forever. He learned to connect physical acts with power, with control, with transactions. School is torture. Pedro is awkward, slow. Other students mock him relentlessly. He has no friends, no social skills. Teachers notice developmental delays, but do nothing. No resources, no help. He's on his own. Benilda will later claim she was a loving mother. Pedro will describe her as cold, physically aggressive, quick to anger. The truth lies somewhere between. Pedro is a young child. His mother catches him in an inappropriate situation with his younger sister. The context doesn't matter. Her reaction does. She throws him out forever. No second chances. A young boy cast onto the streets during a civil war, alone. The very first night changes everything. A stranger approaches, middle-aged man, kind voice, offers food, shelter. Pedro follows him to an abandoned building. The man locks the door. What happens that night destroys something fundamental inside him. The trauma is severe, prolonged. When morning comes, the man leaves. Pedro emerges from the building, injured and forever changed. He will later tell investigators, "My childhood ended that night. What was done to me, I would inflict on others, many others." Pedro survives on the streets for 4 years, begging, stealing, sleeping in doorways and abandoned buildings. He learns to fight, to lie, to survive. He's 12 when an American missionary family finds him. They clean him up, feed him, send him to an orphanage school run by the church. For a moment, there's hope. But at the orphanage, a male teacher notices him. pays special attention, calls him into empty classrooms. The abuse happens again. A pattern forms. Pedro doesn't report it, doesn't tell anyone. Who would believe him? Who would care? He runs away, back to the streets. He drifts through his teenage years. Odd jobs, taxi mechanic, night guard. Nothing lasts. He lives with his mother briefly when she allows it. She tolerates his presence but shows no affection. At 18, he shows zero interest in women. When he finally approaches someone, she rejects him immediately. Terrified by his intensity, his hollow stare, something inside him snaps. Pedro steals a car, gets caught, sentenced to prison. They send him to La Modelo in Bogotá, overcrowded, violent, controlled by gangs. Second day behind bars, 4 inmates corner him in the showers. What happens next is a brutal assault. Prison ritual, establishing dominance, marking him as subhuman. Pedro is massive by now, over 6 feet tall, heavily built. But he doesn't fight back, too shocked, too passive. But something changes afterward. He finds a piece of metal, sharpens it against concrete, makes a crude knife. Over the next 2 weeks, he hunts down 3 of the 4 men who attacked him, takes their lives. Prison investigators rule it self-defense, add only 2 years to his sentence. When Pedro leaves La Modelo in the early 1970s, he's transformed. The last shred of humanity is gone. What remains is rage, cold, focused, uncontrollable. He knows exactly who will pay. Pedro crosses into Peru in the early 1970s, drifts through cities, Lima, Ayacucho, Huancayo, takes odd jobs, electrical work, construction, nothing permanent. But he has a new obsession, young victims. His method develops through trial and error. He approaches them in markets, near schools, in parks, offers small gifts, cheap toys, candy. To poor families, it's treasure. He's soft-spoken, non-threatening, smiles, asks if they want to see something interesting, a puppy, a special place. Most refuse, some don't. The ones who follow never return home. He attacks them, ends their lives, conceals the bodies in shallow graves, or leaves them hidden in brush. By his own later confession, he's responsible for well over 100 deaths in Peru during this period. The exact number will never be known. Many victims are from indigenous communities, Quechua-speaking villages, extreme poverty. When someone goes missing, parents report it. Investigations go nowhere. Limited resources, corruption. Police assume runaways or trafficking. Nobody connects the cases. Nobody suspects a single perpetrator. Then, Pedro makes a mistake. Ayacucho region, 1978. He approaches a young tribal member, tries to lure her with a small doll. Her older brother is watching, shouts. She runs. Tribal men chase Pedro into the forest. They catch him, drag him back, tie him up. The elders decide, execution. They dig a pit, bury him up to his neck, prepare to end him slowly. But an American missionary intervenes, a woman in her 50s. She's built trust with the community over years, pleads with the leaders. This is not the way, she says. Hand him to the authorities. After hours of negotiation, the tribe agrees. They pull Pedro from the pit, hand him to local Peruvian police. The officers take his statement, listen to the tribe's accusations, attempted abduction, suspicious behavior, and release him. No charges, no investigation. Why? Some reports suggest bribery. Others say police didn't care about indigenous complaints. Either way, Pedro walks free. Hundreds more will die because of it. Pedro moves to Ecuador in late 1978, settles in Ambato, but travels constantly. Quito, Riobamba, Latacunga, smaller towns, villages, anywhere he finds targets. He refines his technique, knows what works. He focuses on vulnerable individuals, street youth, vendors, family members, people walking alone. His pace increases, 3 victims per week, sometimes more. In prison interviews, he will explain, "I preferred Ecuador. The people there are more trusting, more innocent, not as suspicious as in Colombia. In Ecuador, they come willingly." The brutality is clinical, methodical. He doesn't prolong suffering unnecessarily, attacks them, ends their lives quickly, conceals them, moves on, but he keeps mental records, locations, landmarks, how many in each province. These details will shock investigators with their precision. May 5, 1979, Ambato City Center, Hortensia Garces, Losada, 11 years old, sells newspapers on a corner, small, thin, wearing a faded dress. Pedro approaches, buys a paper, strikes up conversation, gives her 100 sucres, a huge sum, offers more if she helps him carry something. She hesitates, but 100 sucres is more than her family makes in a week. She follows. An hour later, she's found deceased under a bridge, body hidden in brush. Her family reports her missing that evening. Police file a report. Another missing person. The case goes cold within days. December 14, 1979. El Espinal, Colombia, Pedro's hometown. He returns briefly, encounters Flor Alba Sanchez, 10 years old. She becomes his next victim the same day. 20 days later, police discover her remains in a field, partially decomposed. Another body lies next to her. Blanca Bautista, 12 years old. Both show signs of violence, both in shallow graves. Police suspect an organized group, investigate for weeks, find nothing. January 10, 1980, parking lot in suburban Ambato. Yvonne Jacome, 9 years old, walks to school. Early morning, her mother watches from the doorway, waves goodbye. Yvonne never arrives. Pedro grabbed her in the parking lot, covered her mouth, took her to an abandoned shack he'd scouted days earlier. She's found weeks later at Urbina Square, February 15th, 35 days after her disappearance. A homeless man stumbles on the shack, smells decay, calls police. By now, Ambato police are overwhelmed. 12 unsolved disappearances in 6 months. Families desperate, media pressure mounting, but no suspects, no witnesses, no forensic links. Pedro Alonso López blends into the crowd, a tall, quiet man who keeps to himself. Nobody suspects. In his later police confessions, Pedro reveals his process. "I would prepare everything in advance, find a location, isolated, forest, mountainside. I'd prepare the burial site before bringing the person there, sometimes several sites in one area. That way, I could return. I had a hideout, a secret place where previous victims were already concealed. I'd bring new targets there. It gave me power. They were mine, my collection. I had to see their eyes in daylight. That was essential. In darkness, it would be pointless." According to testimony, he returned to burial sites repeatedly. Weeks later, months later, sat near the locations, talked to them. Forensic psychiatrists identify this as necrophilic tendencies. He saw the deceased as companions, possessions. When asked why he targeted this specific demographic, he answered without hesitation, "It's like eating chicken. Why consume an old chicken when you can have a young one?" No remorse, no horror, just cold logic. To understand how Pedro operated undetected for so long, you need to understand the era. 1970s and 1980s Latin America. Thousands of people disappeared every year. Most never found. August 1981, months after Pedro's arrest, Colombian authorities expose a massive trafficking network. Criminal organizations kidnapping impoverished youth from Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, selling them to childless couples in the United States, Europe, Israel. 500 to 600 individuals taken from Colombia alone, about 100 from Peru, over 100 suspicious adoptions in Ecuador. Victims bought from desperate mothers for $50, resold abroad for $10,000 to $20,000 each. Police and social services overwhelmed. Every disappearance assumed trafficking related. Investigations focused on organized crime, not individual perpetrators. In this chaos, Pedro's crimes slipped through the cracks. Just more missing persons, more grieving families, more cold cases. Authorities later estimated that for every reported victim, 2 or 3 others were never reported at all. Rural poverty, indigenous communities with no police access, people with no birth certificates, no official records, victims the world forgot, a predator nobody noticed. Early 1980, Ambato's central market, hundreds of vendors, thousands of customers daily. 2 women work there, Luz Marina Losada, flower seller, Marina Cuenca, drink stand owner. They've worked this market for years. They notice a man who doesn't fit, enormous, over 6.5 feet tall, 250 pounds, walks slowly through the market, stops near certain sections, watches young people helping their parents. He approaches Luz Marina, offers her money. For what? Then she realizes he's asking her to introduce him to potential targets. He'll pay well. She refuses immediately. He walks away without argument. An hour later, he approaches Marina Cuenca. Same offer, more money. She refuses. But something terrifies her. Empty expression, hollow stare, the way he watches. The 2 women find each other after shifts. Compare notes. Same man. They decide. Warn other vendors quietly, especially those with family members working. Dangerous individual in the market. Tall, heavy, strange demeanor. If you see him, call for help. For weeks, nothing. The man doesn't return. March 9th, 1980. Mid-morning, he's back. A young person browses a toy stall with her mother, picks up a cheap plastic doll. Can we buy it? Her mother shakes her head. Not today. Maybe next week. The item goes back. Disappointed. Pedro has been watching. He approaches, smiles, offers to buy the doll. A gift. No charge. The mother hesitates. Before she responds, her daughter reaches for it. Pedro takes her hand, starts walking. The mother freezes, then screams, "Stop! He's taken my daughter!" The market erupts. Vendors rush toward Pedro. He tries to run, but he's massive, slow. The crowd surrounds him, cuts off escape. Luz Marina is there, recognizes him instantly, shouts, "This is him, the one I warned you about." Security arrives. Police. They wrestle Pedro to the ground, incredibly strong. Takes 4 officers to restrain him, cuff his hands. The child clings to her mother, crying, unharmed. Pedro's face is blank, no emotion, no fear, just empty. At the station, officers search him, find nothing unusual. Wallet, minimal cash, ID card, Pedro Alonso López, 31 years old. Listed address in Colombia, but he's been living in Ambato. Initial questioning. He's eerily cooperative, polite even. Why were you at the market? Shopping. Why did you try to take her? I didn't. I was buying a toy. She misunderstood. Short answers, controlled, never defensive. They book him for attempted abduction, lock him in a cell. He goes silent, completely, stops responding, sits on the bench, stares at the wall. Days pass, nothing. Police are frustrated. They know something is wrong, but no evidence, no confession, just one attempted crime. Then someone suggests a tactic. The plan is risky, possibly illegal, but detectives are desperate. They select Captain Pastor Cordova, young detective, acting skills, give him a cover story, convicted criminal, violent offenses, transferred to this cell temporarily. They plant him with Pedro. Cordova will describe those 27 days as the most terrifying of his life. The first night, I barely slept. Pedro didn't move, didn't speak, just sat on his bunk, staring at me. I kept a towel wrapped around my throat. If he tried anything, it might buy seconds, enough to shout. Third day, I started my act. Complained about guards, about the system, how they don't understand men like us, men with certain urges. Pedro said nothing, just watched. I kept pushing, talked about my alleged crimes, made them up, described violent acts, getting satisfaction. I felt sick, but I needed his trust. Day 7, he finally spoke, asked how many people I'd harmed. I said 5. He smiled, slight curl of the lip, said, "Only 5?" That's when I knew. Over weeks, Pedro opens up, slowly, then freely, describes crimes in Ecuador, mentions Colombia, Peru. Numbers keep growing. Cordova pushes carefully, details, locations, how he selected targets, how he ended them. Pedro talks and talks. He confesses to over 300 deaths. More than 200 in Ecuador alone, many dozens in Peru, more in Colombia. Specific cases: Hortensia Garces, Yvonne Jacome, Flor Alba Sanchez. Names not released publicly. Details only the perpetrator would know. Cordova memorizes everything. At night, while Pedro sleeps, writes notes on scraps of paper, hides them, passes them to guards during meals. Day 27. Police have enough. Pull Cordova out. Formally interrogate Pedro. Pedro doesn't deny it. Confirms everything. No hesitation, no emotion. But police still don't believe. 300 victims? Impossible. He's exaggerating, seeking notoriety. Then nature confirms his confession. April 1980. The Ambato River floods. Water recedes. 4 bodies exposed, exactly as Pedro described. Police launch a massive operation. Bring Pedro out. Transport him to the countryside under guard. Tell him to show where the others are buried. Pedro agrees, almost enthusiastically. He leads them into the Andean foothills, remote areas, dense forest, mountain paths, points to specific locations. Here, 3 victims, buried in 1979. Officers dig, find remains, exactly where he said. There, under that tree, 2 more. They dig, 2 sets of remains, both young. Prison director Lascano accompanies search teams, later tells journalists, "In the beginning, Lopez was cooperative. Every day, 3 or 4 hidden burial sites. After a couple weeks, he got tired, bored, stopped helping. I think his 300 estimate is underestimated. We only found a fraction." July and August 1980. Police excavate 53 confirmed burial sites across provinces: Tungurahua, Cotopaxi, Chimborazo, Pichincha, Imbabura. Forensic teams work around the clock, identifying remains, matching dental records, comparing missing persons reports, most victims between 8 and 12 years old, all showing signs of strangulation, many showing evidence of assault. Searches expand. Near Ambato, Santo Domingo, villages throughout La Troncal, Tulcan, Quito, Azogues, Manta, Salcedo. Final confirmed count, 110 victims in Ecuador alone. But investigators believe this is a fraction. Many remains never found, decomposed, scattered by animals, washed away by rains. The true number will never be known. July 1981. Trial begins. Judge Jose Roberto Cobos Moscoso presides. Ambato courtroom packed. Families of victims, journalists, onlookers. Pedro Alonso López sits in the defendant's chair, composed, almost bored. Simple shirt and pants, clean-shaven, expressionless. Prosecutors charge him with 57 counts. Focus on strongest forensic evidence. Remains identified. Locations he led them to. Confessions matching physical evidence. But everyone knows the real number is far higher. July 31st, 1981. Pedro pleads guilty. No dramatics, no outburst. Simple acknowledgement. Yes, I did this. Psychiatric evaluation is critical. If legally insane, psychiatric facility instead of prison. Possible eventual release. 3 psychiatrists examine him over weeks. Conclusion: sociopath with severe antisocial personality disorder. Lead psychiatrists report: López does not consciously recognize the difference between good and evil, feels no guilt or remorse, incapable of understanding other people's pain or suffering, views victims as objects, tools for satisfaction, classic narcissistic traits, believes himself superior, special, calls himself the man of the century, but critically, legally sane, understood actions were illegal, took steps to hide evidence, avoided capture, planned crimes, demonstrates rational thought, criminal responsibility, fit to stand trial, fit for sentencing. Early 1982, the judge delivers the sentence. Under Ecuadorian law at the time, maximum prison sentence for any crime is 16 years. No capital punishment, no life imprisonment. Pedro Alonso López sentenced to 16 years, maximum allowed. 16 years for over 110 confirmed deaths, possibly over 300 total. Courtroom erupts. Families scream, cry, demand justice. How is this possible? How can he serve only 16 years? Law is clear. Judge has no discretion. 16 years is maximum. Public outrage enormous. Protests, petitions, calls for reform. Ecuador eventually changes the law. Maximum increase to 25 years. Then life imprisonment for certain crimes. But for Pedro, too late. Sentence stands. Transfer to Garcia Moreno prison near Quito, Ecuador's most secure facility. High walls, guard towers, maximum security. Pedro placed in general population initially. A mistake. Other inmates know who he is, what he did. Those who harm the vulnerable occupy the lowest prison tier. Even among violent criminals, despised. Pedro attacked repeatedly, stabbed with makeshift weapons, beaten in the yard. Guards intervene, attacks continue. Prison officials decide. Protective custody, isolated cell, limited contact, 24-hour surveillance. Early 1990s, journalists request interviews. Prison authorities allow them. Documentary crews, reporters, television programs. Pedro grants interviews willingly, sits across from cameras, composed, articulate, disturbing. One interview, he describes emotional satisfaction during the crimes. There's a moment when you have complete control, complete power. It's intoxicating. Another interview, he backtracks, claims he was only an accomplice. Real perpetrator named Jorge Patiño. Vague descriptions. Locations don't match. Investigators check. No one by that name exists. Pedro is playing games, entertaining himself, manipulating. Despite interviews, confessions, everything, sentence unchanged. 16 years. By law. August 1994. 13 years into sentence. Pedro Alonso López granted early release for good behavior. Good behavior. Prison records show he followed rules, didn't cause trouble, attended programs, model prisoner conduct. Fact that he's a sociopath incapable of genuine reform doesn't matter. Law is procedural. He met requirements, released. 1 hour after stepping out of Garcia Moreno, police arrest him again. Reason: illegal immigrant status, born in Colombia, never obtained Ecuadorian citizenship, undocumented, immediate deportation. Problem: families of victims organized, raised money, offered rewards for anyone who stops Pedro. $25,000, highest bounty, credible threats, people waiting outside prison, cars following police convoy. Police implement extraordinary measures, escort drives in circles over 5 hours, waiting for darkness, back roads, 2 additional vehicles as decoys, armed officers in each, protecting a mass offender from revenge. The irony isn't lost. Colombian border. They hand him over. Pedro Alonso López, 45 years old, free again. Colombia arrests him immediately. Colombian authorities charge Pedro with the 1979 case of Flor Alba Sanchez, the 10-year-old found deceased in El Espinal 20 years earlier. New psychiatric evaluation. Colombian doctors examine him. Initial assessment: signs of psychosis, hallucinations, paranoia. Other doctors dispute, order additional testing. Final conclusion: unhealthy personality traits and antisocial tendencies, but doesn't meet clinical criteria for psychosis or legal insanity. Sent to psychiatric ward of La Modelo prison, Bogotá, same prison where he experienced assault decades earlier, where he took 3 lives in retaliation. Now he's back, placed in isolation, doesn't receive medication, spends days exercising, reading, watching television, keeps himself groomed, clean, quiet. Colombian press shows little interest, old news, no interviews, no documentaries, no attention. Prison psychiatrists declare him legally insane, recommend transfer to secure psychiatric facility. New evaluation, different doctors, different conclusion. Verdict: mentally healthy, capable of understanding right from wrong, no longer a threat. They release him on $50 bail. Conditions: monthly police check-ins, continued outpatient psychiatric treatment, prohibition from leaving Bogotá. Pedro signs paperwork, steps out into freedom, never shows up for a single appointment. Bogotá, Colombia. Pedro enters a government office, updates his national ID card, renews identification documents. Routine procedure: last confirmed sighting, last official record, last time anyone can say with certainty Pedro Alonso López was here. After that, nothing. Complete disappearance. Interpol issues international arrest warrant. Red notice. New case. A young victim found deceased near Bogotá. Method matches López's known pattern. Strangulation. Evidence of assault. Shallow burial. Authorities suspect Pedro. Launch search. Check addresses. Interview family. Track financial records. Nothing. Some investigators believe he's deceased, ended in revenge, eliminated by associates, died from illness, remains buried somewhere unmarked. Others believe he's alive, living under assumed name, remote village, another country, Venezuela, Brazil, Peru, anywhere. Truth is, nobody knows. Pedro Alonso López, one of the most prolific offenders in recorded history. 110 confirmed victims, likely over 300. 3 countries, over a decade. But this isn't just about him. It's about the systems that failed. A mother who abandoned her 8-year-old onto the streets. An orphanage where a teacher abused a student. A prison that couldn't protect an 18-year-old. Police in Peru who released him after a tribe caught him. Laws in Ecuador capping sentences at 16 years. Psychiatrists in Colombia who declared a mass offender healthy and released him on $50 bail. Every point was a chance to stop him. Everyone failed. The victims, 110 confirmed, likely hundreds more. Young people, 8 to 12 years old, poor, vulnerable, from families the world ignored. According to Universidad del Ecuador data, between 2014 and 2024, teenagers aged 12 to 17 remain the most vulnerable for disappearances, 50.7% of all missing persons cases. How many became victims of predators like Pedro? How many cases unreported in rural communities, indigenous villages, families too poor to navigate the system? How many offenders operating now, undetected, just like Pedro, for over a decade? These questions have no answers. What we know: Pedro Alonso López, born October 8, 1948, Santa Isabel, Colombia, confessed to over 300 deaths across Peru, Colombia, Ecuador. 110 victims confirmed through physical evidence, sentenced to 16 years in Ecuador, released 1994. Arrested in Colombia, released 1998. Last seen 1999 in Bogotá, renewing ID, current whereabouts unknown. Status, alive or deceased, unknown. And perhaps that's the most terrifying part. Somewhere, a monster may still walk free.